Back in the early 80s, almost every computer company wanted to get a product into the home computer market, and the company Cromemco was no exception. Today we're going to take a look at the extremely odd Cromemco C10 here on Vintage Geek. Just a reminder, if you like vintage computers and vintage tech, be sure to like and subscribe, and I encourage you to consider becoming a Vintage Geek member at vintagegeek.com. Back in 1974, two PhD college students named Harry Garland and Roger Malin started a company called Cromemco. Now, this was because they were actually very interested in the original MIT's Altair machine, one of the first computers, and really were impressed with its design and its overall bus structure. The thing was that there really wasn't a lot of peripherals available for the Altair at the time. This was the mid-70s after all. So the two of them started out building peripherals for the Altair system, and notably they came out with the first known digital camera back in 1975. It was called the Cromemco Cyclops, and it could provide a digital image to the Altair system. However, at the time there was no way to actually see a graphics output from the Altair, so there was no way that they could see this digitally created image anywhere on a screen. So the next thing they tried to do was create a graphics interface card for the Altair. Their efforts were successful, and they came out with the Cromemco Dazzler, a color graphics interface card that worked with the S100 bus, which they had recently named. That was part of the Altair system. It wasn't long before the Cromemco pair started their own project, as they realized that there were some opportunities with the S100 bus to build a high-quality industrial-grade computer system. And that's what they did. By 1976, Cromemco had built their first official computer. It was called the Cromemco Z1, and it looked very similar to the Altair unit. They continued to grow their product line, and we actually have a Z2D here at the Vintage Geek Museum that a lot of people would say is really kind of the high-end tier of the S100 type systems. It's got a rack-mounted chassis and has a multi-user environment, as I understand it, and it's a very advanced system and very well built. The company was renowned for its build quality in its computer systems. But as the early 80s started to roll around, Cromemco also got the urge, as in so many other companies, to put something into the home computing market, as everyone knew that the IBM PC was just around the corner. So they decided to build their own version of a personal computer of sorts that could go in the home. This is along the same vein as the Xerox 820, which we covered in an earlier video. The Cromemco C10 was officially born, and its whole objective in life was to create a home computer, something value-priced, that would be able to get into a totally different market. Strangely, though, Cromemco didn't really use some of their strong suits in this machine. It actually is not compatible with the S100 bus, which is really where Cromemco shines, but the system is really interesting nonetheless. The form factor is honestly very cool, and I would say that if someone was shopping for one of these machines for the office environment, they would probably be inclined to look at the Cromemco versus the Xerox just due to the sheer desktop space and size of the unit. Unfortunately, the computer didn't really have much of a shelf life. Cromemco never really did anything else in the personal computing space, probably because this system ran CP/M, but it really wasn't on the same level as the IBM PC. Now, obviously I have no experience with this computer myself. I don't really know what it's capable of. We do actually have some of the original documentation for this and an original software package that is still sealed. We have not broken the seal on that because we don't know if the machine works. We've never actually tried to power it up. But I want to study the actual machine itself first, kind of see what some of the features look like on the exterior. We're going to take a look under the cover, see how it's built inside, and then maybe we'll try to power it up. Let's give it a try here on Vintage Geek. This is the Cromemco C10 keyboard. Now, the first thing I noticed about this is that it's very small form factor, especially compared to some of the other systems we've looked at, and certainly the Xerox 820, which you could fit, I think, probably 3 of these keyboards within the footprint of the 820s. This keyboard is very compact and very efficient from what I can tell. I noticed right away that the top row has 2 different function sequences, so the normal number keys can actually double as function keys, as well as additional function keys that do other things. So you can actually do the control with one of these to do one set of functions, and you can do the control and shift in one of these for a different function. So I guess that's making the most out of the keys that you have in a small amount of space. The rest of this looks pretty straightforward. The arrow arrangement on the right-hand side of the keyboard is really interesting. It does have the 4 arrows, but they're not oriented in the way that we're used to. They're kind of in a square, and the tab key is directly above them. The delete key being next to the space bar here at the bottom is also different than other keyboards that I've seen, and I really actually love the red control key, the way that that sticks out on the kind of sea of the off-white, and then you've got the darker brown keys as well. Visually, the whole thing is pleasing, I think. It's well built. It doesn't have a lot of weight to it. The keys themselves have good motion. Feels like something that you could use pretty easily. Regarding the actual connection to the computer, conveniently, this uses a standard modular telephone cord, so that should be pretty easy to replace should we have an issue, although this one looks perfectly clean, so I can't imagine that it will be a problem. Other than that, it's a basic keyboard unit, and I like the way that they fit as much as they can into a small space that actually matches the width of the computer system itself. This is the Cromemco C10 disk drive. It is a 5¼ inch floppy unit and looks kind of standard, but then when you really start getting a little closer to it, it's got some different features. One is the color scheme. You've kind of got the darker inset in the actual latch section of the disk drive, and the latch itself is a little bit different in the fact that it's kind of inset in the actual front of the drive.
Nice.
A little bit different there, but I'm assuming the inner workings are similar to other drives from the time period. From a connector perspective, this disk drive has something very similar to what we've seen in the Commodore PET, where you've got kind of this Centronics connector and it actually has a pass-through. My assumption here is that you could actually daisy chain multiple disk drives to the system. Obviously, we only have the one disk drive, so I don't have a way of testing that theory. It's also possible other peripherals could have plugged into the backside of the connector. I'm not really sure. Everything looks really clean and fairly compact in this unit. I also noticed that it does not have a separate power supply, so it is getting its power from the Centronics connector from the main machine. All of these components do have the Cromemco stickers and serial numbers on the bottom of them, and the build quality overall seems really nice. Now, this whole system was actually in a box when we received it. I'm not sure if it actually received any use or not, but everything was very clean, and I'm hopeful that things will be functional. And this is the Cromemco C10 computer itself with built-in CRT. I have to give it a little bit of praise because overall its simplicity and design is really nice. I like the two-tone kind of brown and beige color scheme of the whole system, and the name plating and everything around the CRT is pretty nice looking and looks very professional. Now, this is a 12-inch CRT in this unit, and really the front of the system, that's really all there is other than the name badging. There's not even a contrast control or anything under the bezel in the front, so it's very simple in the way that it's designed, and honestly, the weight of the unit isn't actually that heavy either, considering computers of the time and some of the weights involved there. I want to talk a little bit about the connectors on the back plane of the computer. Continuing with the simple design of the system, we have a power cord that's physically attached to the unit, followed by the connector for the disk drives, which we saw the connector for that earlier that has some kind of a piggybacked function on it. We've got an accessory connector. Now, I have to assume that that would have been for either a printer or maybe it would have been for a serial connection for some kind of a terminal or connecting to a larger system. I'm not sure. We've got the modular pin connector for the keyboard, and then at the end there's a connector that's simply labeled computer. Now, that one confuses me a little bit because obviously this is a computer, but my assumption is that this system was designed to be able to connect to the larger Cromemco systems. This is just a pure guess on my part. I assume we'll learn more about that as we dig into the manuals and so forth for the machine. Very simple connections and everything on the back. Someone that's an average user at home would have this thing set up in approximately 5 minutes and potentially be up and doing some work very quickly. So I like what they've done here with the design and the connectors, and everything is very basic. I want to take a quick look at the inside of the unit and kind of see how things are built and put together, and then maybe we'll get to trying this out. We can start out with the CRT itself, which appears to be a Monotron unit according to the stickers on it. In the back of the cabinet, we've got this separate metal plate that looks like it houses the power supply for the system. I am impressed with the build quality of this. Now, this is obviously a very clean unit. It came out of the box, but everything looks really well designed here and fits the space really nicely. We've got the actual controller for the CRT that kind of sits in the next layer directly below the CRT. Then there's a metal cage that's actually over a separate printed circuit board in the bottom of the chassis that I have to assume is where the actual CPU and memory resides. Now, this system uses a Z80 processor like so many of the systems we've looked at before. It also has 64 kilobytes of RAM by default. At least from what I've read, that's what it says about the system. I can't quite get into the lower chassis to see exactly how that board is configured. I don't want to dig that deeply yet because we want to see what will happen when we power on test the unit first. So on that note, let's get to it. We've got our C10 all connected and ready to go. I did open the user's manual on this to kind of see what we might expect if the unit does power up. According to the book, there's a built-in monitor program that does a lot of self-check functions when you turn the machine on for the first time. So I'm hopeful that those will actually run, but that's presuming that this will turn on at all. So let's give it a shot. I will also mention that when we were looking at the different components of the system, I did not see the power switch, which is actually just under the kind of bezel in the back, which is why I'm on this side of the machine to turn it on. So here goes nothing. Well, I heard something click inside, but it doesn't seem like there's anything happening with CRT.
But you have to do it off of what?
Oh.
It's on.
Is it?
Just came on.
What? Well, we've got something. Something's better than nothing, right? It's not quite a menu. It's a little bit more trippy than that. We've got a nice horizontal scroll pattern going on the screen. Well, at least we know the CRT works. You can kind of hear a little bit of a sound when you turn the machine on. I'm not sure what that would be, something in the power supply maybe. My guess is that it's, I think the video controller for the actual CRT is probably fine. I just don't think it's actually getting a signal from the PC board itself. Well, there went nothing. Not a huge success today with the Cromemco C10. Did get the CRT to actually output some video, some rolling in various forms of lines. My assumption here is that the video controller board is working. All of the controls for vertical size, vertical hold, horizontal hold are making a difference in the pattern displayed on the CRT, but nothing from the actual computer itself seems to be doing anything. So actually interacting with any of the keys on the keyboard, according to the manual, you could hit escape to get to some kind of monitor menu system. That doesn't seem to do anything. Nothing really changed any of the screen pattern with the keyboard itself, so I assume that the actual CPU board has some kind of an issue and it's not communicating. We may be missing a power supply voltage. It's hard to say. This is the first time we've tried to power up this machine. Gonna have to get in here and do a little bit of diagnostic work. I'm sure Justin will be anxious to get into this box and see what he can find in the power supplies, and I'm sure we'll be doing another video if we can get a little bit further with it. It's an interesting computer, and I'm really kind of excited to see what it can do once you get into it. I did study the manuals that we have for it, and it looks like there's a fairly advanced menu system to get into the various software. There was a demo that came with it, so there's some kind of cool things here that I think we could get into at some point once we get the machine in a little bit more functional condition. But this is a good first look at it here today on Vintage Geek, and I'm glad that we have this as part of our collection, if anything, just for the cool space age look that this machine brings to the table. Hey, just want to remind you that if you like vintage tech and vintage computers and the content we create here, be sure to like and subscribe. We put out videos like this each and every week. Also would encourage you to go to our website to become a Vintage Geek member. As a member, you have access to all sorts of additional video content, code snippets, and more. Plus, you get discounts on museum admission. You can do that at vintagegeek.com. Until next time, I'm Aaron, and this has been Vintage Geek.